Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. So, Xbox Game Pass just revealed 10 more games for the first half of February. Again, this is just the first half of the month, so they're not quite finished just yet, but Game Pass subscribers do have some good-looking games to look forward to here in the first half of February, including a high-profile Xbox console exclusive. So we're going to go over all of that later on in the video. Then also, we have been talking a lot about acquisitions here recently, and well, today's no different, as it looks like there's going to be plenty more of that here in the horizon. So make sure to stay tuned for all of that later on in the video as well. To get things started off today, though, we are going to be talking about an upcoming PlayStation event, and well, this one's actually coming really soon, and when I mean really soon, I mean as in tomorrow on February 2nd. This will be a new State of Play focused on Gran Turismo 7. Don't go in expecting to see any other games. This event is focused on Gran Turismo 7 with quite a bit of footage for that matter. You can actually take a look over at the PlayStation blog where they say this. The first 2022 State of Play arrives later this week, and we're all revved up for just over 30 minutes of new PlayStation 5 footage and gameplay details for Gran Turismo 7. Watch live February 2nd on Twitch or YouTube starting 2 p.m. Pacific Time or 5 p.m. Eastern. So for you Gran Turismo fans, or really just racing fans in general, this is an event you might want to tune into. Of course, Gran Turismo 7 is set to release next month on March 4th, and up to this point, we really haven't seen too much on this game, so it will be nice to get this big blowout for Gran Turismo 7. If you really think about it, it has been a long time since we've seen a numbered entry for the Gran Turismo franchise. I mean, we did have Gran Turismo Sport, but fans didn't seem to be particularly overjoyed by that. They kind of want to get back to the roots of this experience, and it seems like Gran Turismo 7 is very much going to do that. This is also going to be the first big simulation racing game to release this generation so far. So for you racing fans out there, again, this is definitely something you might want to pay attention to, where we're going to get a lot of footage, over 30 minutes in fact. Moving on, we are going to be talking a lot about acquisitions today. We'll kind of talk a little bit more about this later, but the first of which is actually that Xbox Activision Blizzard acquisition. Now, there has been a lot of acquisitions here in recent years, whether that be from Microsoft, from Sony, Tencent, which all this is going to be really important to this specific topic, but this Activision Blizzard acquisition has just absolutely rocked the game industry. Here, you're not just talking about the biggest game acquisition of all time at nearly $70 billion, but you're also just talking about one of the biggest acquisitions in tech history. So this acquisition is quite massive, to say the least, and because of that, there has been some legal questions. Right now, they are in a letter of intent to acquire Activision Blizzard, but there has been some concern, I would say, within the community on whether this deal actually makes it through all of the regulations. Now, we'll kind of jump back to that here in just a moment, but we did get a little update on this aspect just today. So what's happening now is that Bloomberg is reporting that the FTC, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, will be taking the reins on reviewing Microsoft's intended acquisition of Activision Blizzard. Now, this is actually pretty standard, and it's not really out of the ordinary or anything like that, but they will be taking a look at this acquisition to make sure it doesn't break any kind of antitrust laws. You got to understand that this is one of the biggest acquisitions ever, so this really comes as no surprise that they will be reviewing this acquisition just as they would with any other acquisition of this size. The big question everybody is going to ask, though, is will the FTC actually have any problems with this acquisition? Here recently, they have added some stricter rules when it comes to these big tech acquisitions, but at the same time, I don't imagine that this is going to be a big issue. Yes, they're spending a lot of money on Activision Blizzard, and it's the biggest acquisition that we've seen in the game industry, but at the same time, there's a lot of competition within the game industry. Even with this Activision Blizzard acquisition, Xbox is still not the market leader. They'd still be behind both Sony and Tencent, which both of those have acquired several studios in the last couple years. I mean, we were just talking about this yesterday. Sony just acquired Bungie, and they are looking to acquire several other studios. So there's plenty of competition within the game industry, and that is going to go over very well for Microsoft. Now, is this a 100% guarantee? No, absolutely not. There is a possibility that maybe a problem could arise at some point, but if that were the case, then Microsoft could actually negotiate to make sure that this acquisition makes it through. They could do something like make Call of Duty remain multi-platform to make sure that this deal goes through, and that is something that could happen. We saw when Disney acquired Fox, they actually sold off parts of that company to make sure the acquisition went through. So could something like that happen here? Maybe, maybe not. Interestingly enough, though, IGN did talk to their legal experts, and they told them that the deal is unlikely to break current antitrust laws. But it seems clear that the deal will be receiving more scrutiny than Microsoft's acquisition of ZeniMax Media, which again makes sense considering the cost of this acquisition. Again, as of this moment, this all just seems like standard procedures and nothing really out of the ordinary. An acquisition of this size will draw more attention, but I really don't think that we're going to see any problems with this acquisition per se. My opinion is that the worst case scenario here for Microsoft would be to just simply make Call of Duty go multi-platform if any problem does arise, but I guess we'll just kind of have to see how all of this plays out. Okay, so let's just go and change pace here for a second. We will talk a little bit more about acquisitions just in a bit, I promise, but we do have some Xbox Game Pass games to talk about today, as they revealed 10 more games for the first half of February. Yeah, Xbox Game Pass just never quite stops, and your backlog is just going to continue to grow and grow. But this is actually another good month for Xbox Game Pass. Again, this is only the first half of the month, but what we have here is definitely good looking so far. So let's just go and check it out. The first half of February will include Crossfire X, Besiege, Dreamscaper, Edge of Eternity, Infernax, Skull the Hero Slayer, Telling Lies, Ark Ultimate Survivor Edition, The Last Kids on Earth, and The Staff of Doom, and then last but not least, Contrast. Now this is actually a pretty interesting lineup with more than just a few noteworthy games, and this all starts with Crossfire X. This has been a game that Xbox fans have been keeping an eye on for quite a long time. The thing about this release is that Crossfire is actually a really popular first-person shooter over in places like China and then South Korea. So Crossfire does have a big fan base, but what makes Crossfire X just so interesting is that it includes a single-player campaign that was developed in partnership with Remedy Entertainment. Now that right there is the exciting part, because Remedy Entertainment is actually one of the best at making single-player content. They've made games like Alan Wake, Quantum Break, and of course most recently Control. So they do a great job at making single-player content, and that is one of the reasons to keep an eye on Crossfire X. We, however, haven't gotten as much coverage as I would have liked when it comes to Crossfire X, but the good thing is that it will be releasing directly into Xbox Game Pass on February 10th. Another game here, though, that I think is kind of exciting would be Skull the Hero Slayer. This is a game that I have been wanting to play for quite a long time, actually. Skull is a fast-paced action roguelike game with some platforming elements to it, and because you are a skeleton, you can actually swap your head to change your playstyle. It is a really interesting mechanic, but I've heard a lot of good things about this game. It has reviewed well, with it having an 80 overall score on Metacritic, and if you take a look over at Steam reviews, 93% of users do recommend Skull the Hero Slayer. So Skull the Hero Slayer could end up surprising some people out there. For you JRPG fans out there, though, I know there has been a lot of talk about Xbox needing more JRPGs, and they've definitely done that so far this generation, and here we have Edge of Eternity, and it just adds to that list. Edge of Eternity has been available in early previews for quite a long time. I actually bought this over on Steam years ago. I thought it was pretty decent for what it was, though I'm sure it's probably changed a lot since I've last played it, but nonetheless, it will be available on February 10th, so for JRPG fans, you might want to check that one out. For those that are a little bit more creative than I am, though, I have heard some good things about Besiege as well. This is a physics building game where you solve these different physics-related puzzles by creating different war machines to take out fortresses and other things such as that. I have heard that this one is quite a fun and addictive game, and for that matter, we have to talk about Ark, the Survivor Edition. This is actually a pretty big release here for Xbox Game Pass, as Ark is a popular franchise, and with the Ultimate Survival Edition, they are saying that you will be able to experience everything that the Ark franchise has to offer with Game Pass in this definitive collection. So this is a nice pickup for Xbox Game Pass. Ark is a good survival game, and I mean, when I played this game years ago, I could not put this game down. To this day, it's actually one of my most played games over on Steam, so it's really nice to see it come over to Xbox Game Pass here with all of its content included. The last game that kind of caught my eye here, though, would be Contrast. The thing about Contrast is that this is actually Compulsion's first game, which of course Compulsion now is owned by Xbox. So this is their first game, which is this really unique puzzle platformer, and for a lot of fans out there, they kind of view this as a bit of an underrated title. It didn't exactly review all that well, but if you actually take a look over at Steam reviews, again, 90% of everybody recommends this game, so there's definitely something to be enjoyed here. And if you want to take a look back at one of the reasons Xbox acquired them, you definitely need to check out Contrast. You can really see the potential with this studio and just how creative they are, and that's the case with both Contrast as well as We Happy Few, so you might want to go check that one out. Nonetheless, though, you Xbox Game Pass subscribers, you continue to win as just more great games come in every single month. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about some more acquisitions, because it doesn't sound like things are going to slow down at all throughout 2022. So this one is coming from Jeff Keighley, which, as we all know, he does have a lot of sources throughout the industry. He doesn't typically leak information per se, but he does have the Game Awards, and he talks with a lot of people within the game industry. So there is a reason to believe what he is saying here, and he said this over on Twitter. Have heard from multiple people, as you might suspect, there are a few other big video game deals in final stages of negotiations. It's going to be an interesting year. And yeah, he's right. That is interesting. It looks like the acquisition spree is just getting started. And you've kind of been seeing this over the last couple months. I mean, Take-Two, they did acquire Zynga for like $12 billion. And of course, Sony just bought Bungie. And obviously, as we talked about earlier, Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard. So it's been a rather busy couple of months. But from the sounds of it, it's not the end quite yet. For that matter, we're already hearing from Sony themselves. They do plan to make more acquisitions. So I do imagine that we will hear from Sony in 2022. Then you have other companies such as Tencent, the Embracer Group. Both of those remain very active when it comes to acquisitions. So it will be really interesting to see what big acquisitions that Jeff Keighley is referring to here. Now, that's where fan speculation is kind of running rampant, though, because one thing that I have been seeing pop up a lot here ever since that Activision Blizzard acquisition is that maybe another big publisher will be snatched up. I constantly hear about Sega, Square Enix, and Capcom, even Take-Two being acquired, but truthfully, I don't think that these big publisher acquisitions are suddenly going to become a common thing. Yes, there might be some interest in some of these big publishers, but are they actually willing to sell? See, the thing about Activision Blizzard was they were kind of in a unique mess. As we all know, Activision Blizzard has been dealing with some problems, so that did play a part into this acquisition. As for these other companies, most of them don't really have a big reason to sell. The only one that really comes to my mind that might be willing to would be Konami, because they're not really doing too much with their game-related IP. I mean, they have been doing stuff in terms of animation. They have been licensing out some of their games, from my understanding. So they are coming back a little bit, but that's the only one that really comes to my mind that maybe would be willing to sell. Truthfully, by this point, I think the game community would actually be pretty happy with Konami being bought out, since again, they don't really do much with their IP, so somebody else surely could do a little bit better of a job than Konami, but nonetheless, I instead would kind of look more towards big independent studios. There's still some pretty big independent studios out there, but yeah, let me know what you all think about this. What big studio do you think will be acquired in 2022, and do you think another big publisher will be acquired or not? Let me know in the comments below. Let's go ahead and take a look at the poll of the day, though, because we do get to talk a little bit more about acquisitions before we go. As I asked you all, do you think Sony acquiring Bungie for $3.6 billion and keeping them a multi-platform studio is a smart decision? This is definitely a different strategy than what we've seen from PlayStation in the past, but it does seem like most of you all agree with Sony here that yes, this is a good decision. 52% of you did say yes, while 35% of you said no. And I do understand your all's point here. While it is a strange and odd acquisition, just because this is coming from PlayStation and it's something that they typically wouldn't do to make their games multi-platform, but it does seem like that they are changing their strategy quite a bit. And in the long term, with Bungie games being multi-platform, and they do focus on live service games that makes a lot of money on microtransactions, DLC, expansions, all that stuff, they're going to make a lot of money in the long term. I think it's kind of easy to forget just how much money microtransactions can make, but Sony clearly saw last generation that they do make a lot of money on games like Fortnite, Destiny, Apex Legends, and so on and so forth. They made a lot of money on these microtransactions, and instead of just taking 30% of the cut, they want to take 100% of the cut now over on PlayStation, or 70% of the cut over on places like Xbox. So they will make a lot of money on an acquisition like this in the long term, even if it doesn't necessarily primarily sell PlayStation consoles. Of course, they can also do some other things with the IP, but yeah, the one thing about this acquisition is that it is quite expensive at $3.6 billion. It just seems like that's the way these acquisitions are working now, and it just seems like these studios are going to cost more and more as time goes on, and that actually might be another reason that we are seeing acquisitions made right now before the price increases even further next year or even the year after that. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget to bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.